this conversation, it's not all about rankings, right? It's a mirror of how kind of societies is absorbing AI into daily life. Welcome to Generation AI, the podcast where we demystify artificial intelligence in higher education and beyond. I'm your host, JC Bonilla, joined as always by my co-host, Ardis Kadiu. Welcome back, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing great. Now remember, I kind of belong in the Mediterranean Sea. You know, it's like it's what my skin is built for. I'm coming back from my brother got married this past week, and his wedding was in Tuscany, and took the opportunity to spend a few days there with the family. But also, we went to southern Italy and did some spend a little time there in the Amalfi Coast, which is amazing and beautiful. So
Everybody already has the Mediterranean vibes, Italian vibes, rosé, seafood
I've had
vibes,
so much white wine on this trip, so it was like
because you're not a white drinker. You
no.
go red, right? So you probably done your consumption of the past decade in a weekend type of thing, right?
That's right. I've had so much white wine and fish, or seafood is amazing. So.
Well, welcome back. It's great to see you. I was telling you before the pleasure of doing nothing, an Italian staple. So, just what was the big takeaway on a trip like this that is so family focused? Your brother is getting married. You're there with the family in an incredible part of the world. So, what is the one takeaway for you?
I don't know if I have one takeaway, but time really slows down when you're traveling, and I think Petter, because our friend Petter, he does a lot of traveling, and that's the one thing that he mentioned is like, hey, I love traveling because time slows down, and it seems like I've been away for like a whole month, so like there's so many things happening, so traveling is always really good. And time slows down, you get a chance to reflect on things, and then you come back and you look at things with certainly a different perspective. So as I was away, not a lot of AI as I was keeping up with things. A lot of stuff has happened over the past couple of weeks in AI, but it kind of gave me a chance to see things, to kind of slow down and to look at trends and to look at things a little bit differently, not being in the day-to-day grind, for sure.
Yeah. One other question before we jump into the episode. We said a few months ago that we're going to be tracking your journey as a builder. So with this mindset of like slowing down and like thinking, I wonder how much of the builder turned on. So what's the share back to our followers and friends of Ardis's builder mind, not the CEO, if you will?
Yeah. I mean, the builder, it's like I already have
5 companies.
There's projects. Yes, I have 3 companies there. I have all the domain names, and I do have the different experimentations and different kind of directions, and we'll probably talk more about that over the next few months. But right now, I've been focusing. Like I said, I took the time. This was probably one of the vacations where I took the time to not look at my Slack and not look at my phone a lot.
I saw that. And I'm very proud of you, man, for doing it.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Yeah, and even my wife called me out on that. She said, "Hey, I think this is like a first that you haven't done that." So, but which worked out really, really well. So now it's back. It's kind of back to school. Back to everything. We have a very, very busy fall here at Element over the next couple of months as conference season starts. Next week is NACAC, and the week after that, I got another trip. But then, we go in October, some of the big conferences, ACC, EduCause, and so on and so forth. So it's a big fall for Element for sure. And then with my transitioning out as well, kind of moving on to the builder mode, I need to start doing a lot of things myself now, because until now I've been relying on everybody else. So hopefully we'll be giving our audience a lot more practical how-tos and lessons over the next few months as I start to actually do a lot more things myself, building product from the ground up. We did that last week with our notebook LM and how we're using it. So we went more practical. We hope everybody was, kind of caught up with that. And I think that was one of the better episodes that we kind of put out in terms of practicality. Prior to that, we did an episode on enterprise AI adoption and this MIT study that came out with 95% of AI pilots don't deliver any value. That number or that study was a little bit flawed, but we still kind of talked about how true enterprise is getting value today out of these big AI pilots, and today we're switching our view, and we're going to talk about A16Z. They do their annual top 100 Gen AI consumer applications report, so this is their fifth edition of that. We covered it last year, and then we're going to cover it again today. But this comes on the heels of a view on enterprise adoption report from MIT, which kind of put a chilling effect on the market over the last few weeks because, was just waiting. There was a lot of hype around the delivery and how much AI was contributing to the ROI of enterprises and the value it was delivering. And everybody was just looking for like this counter to it. And when the report came out, even though it didn't really quite apply to a lot of us, it put a chilling effect to everybody and start questioning, well, how much of that value is AI delivering, or how much, how are you adopting it so it's delivering that value right away?
Yeah, so 100% right. In this retro that you kind of provided based on our episodes, right? It's been fast. The conversation has been dominated by frontier labs. We covered GPT-5 and Claude and Gemini and all these wonderful things, right? And then the chill effect, as you mentioned, right? It kind of feels that it's B2B, right? We saw what the report indicated. We kind of felt it that way a little bit of element. So we recognize some of the data. 95 looks too big. And then also you have other enterprises like Salesforce reporting, and the numbers are not as big B2B player. We have the conference at HubSpot, and we start hearing some of those frameworks emerge. So one of the important things that we want to switch to is that out of the B2B conversation, there is this consumer apps report, as you mentioned, comes from this consecutive 5th year report, and it just tells us the story of the consumers, us, right? And the interesting thing in consumers, everybody, is that we see consumers as the interface layer between adoption, monetization, and kind of culture embedded in AI. So in other words, a very different paradigm in technology adoption, it's happening with AI because it's a bottom-up approach. We see consumers leading enterprises in terms of things that they're doing. And I don't know if I can speak of this, just my wife told me today, in Goldman Sachs, they're releasing the applications of Copilot, and they're starting to create guardrails like today, right? In Q3 of 2025, some businesses just cannot go as fast as consumers are going. So it's a really good conversation because it allows us to understand why this is important. So Ardis, can we go deeper onto the report itself? So it's called the A16Z top 100 reports. It's been 5 years in the making. Do you want to talk a little bit about what this means, how this report gets put together? Because we have about 4 to 5 sections, and we're going to do a deep dive. But the context of the report, where does it come from, and why is it so important, given that it's the voice of the consumers? And also, who is the producer?
Yeah, of course. So the producer is A16Z, which is a venture capitalist. So Andreessen Horowitz, it was one of the early investors in a lot of these AI, but they basically do a lot of research and they do a lot of work around the ecosystem. And they're big proponents of AI. So they've been doing this report now. This is the 5th edition, top 100 AI consumer apps. And it's really based on the monthly active users on mobile. So there's charts on active users, and they're also looking at web traffic to those sites as well, to certain properties. So it's really based on the traffic, and it's really based on the numbers monthly active users for mobile, and they're looking at both mobile and web. So if when you look at mobile, you think about an app like ChatGPT on mobile, or when you look at a web, you think about ChatGPT.com, for example. So they're looking at both of those numbers, and they are basically determining, hey, who has the largest traffic, and they're categorizing those different properties, and they're putting that list based on the top 100. Based on that. And of course, they kind of consolidate those lists and they group things together, and they have certain trends as part of that. So, and that's what we're going to be doing today. It's like we're going to be looking at this overview. We're going to be looking at kind of the trends of what's happening or overall in the ecosystem, and also how certain types of groups of apps are becoming more popular versus others. And we'll take a look at what has changed from last year to this year. Does that make sense?
100%. So everybody, the story here is not about who is the biggest, fastest, more powerful model, rather who has the growing user base, if you will, and the shifts that is taking place. The patterns that we saw, and we're going to have our episode around the all-stars, basically new companies that are emerging. There's a shift of sustainability. Obviously, Vibe coding emerges. And there's a really interesting conversation we're going to have about regional dynamics. In our prep for this, I told you that I basically fed the notes to Notebook LM debate mode. And it was fascinating how I actually picked on this. And it felt like a really, China versus the world type of conversation. So we'll have all that. Let me turn a question to you. You read it. What was your part? Like the one takeaway that you're like, anything that came to mind for you?
Yeah, so it was interesting. So essentially, the biggest takeaway was that the ecosystem is starting to stabilize, right?
Yes.
So there's this idea of stabilization. So now everybody's consolidating after the same type of players. There's only 11 new names on the web list, and then this compared to about 17 newcomers in earlier in the year. But basically, it signals a market maturity as winners are consolidating their positions. So, everybody, you saw ChatGPT adding more and more and more users with, I think they're at about 700 million to 800 million weekly active users. And we've been talking about this for the past few months. But this is the big thing. So there's a big maturity that's happening, and the winners are getting bigger and bigger, and everybody's consolidating around that.
Ardis, and this is something that you know really well, someone who's got a lot of deep foundational work on web development, your companies and whatnot. So the report starts with a distinction between unique web visitors and active users, right? So let's just go there, because in a way, as you start seeing the differences, right, there's, for example, Grok showcases in the top 3 of monthly visits, unique, right? But not in the top 3 of active users. So talk about the difference between volume of active users versus volume of unique users, and what does that mean in terms of your AI adoption and the technologies powering this?
Well, so, when you're looking at, for example, monthly active users on mobile, a lot of people just use ChatGPT on their desktop, right? So they don't necessarily use it on their mobile devices. And I tend to use Grok quite a bit on my mobile device just because it's a lot faster, it's a lot easier. Also, Gemini, I tend to use on my mobile device. So there's different ways that people are using this, these apps. And then, the way that people reflect visits to those sites versus the active users. So active users are with accounts, whereas the visits are just web traffic that is even anonymous users that are going into those web traffic. So it's how many times that page has loaded and so on and so forth. So the unique part is a little bit different. So they're looking at both of those based on traffic and also the active users on the devices on mobile. Mobile, you can see because it's a download. It's you see the traffic that's happening, what the popularity is. Whereas in web, you're seeing the traffic specifically.
So the big catch here, or the big differentiation, right, as the report gets constructed, right, is you can be big on web, but you can be under-penetrated yet on mobile or vice versa,
Right.
right? So,
Yep.
is it intentional, strategically speaking? So if I'm ChatGPT, I am all about using it on my phone and on my desk, my desktop. So if I'm using it at the same level, but to your point, right? Why would you say that some users are not so heavy on Grok on their mobile? Is it because is it designed for a market that just doesn't benefit from these models? Does it connect to what we discussed before? Linear models that are kind of designed to live somewhere else as opposed to your phone. What can we just say about those differences from your point of view?
Look, if you're using stuff on mobile, you're making basically you're deciding to download that app, and it's habit forming, right? Whereas if you're testing
Exactly.
things out, you might just be going out on the web and might be trying things out separately. But I don't think that matters quite a bit now. I think if we get to talk about the themes that are happening, overall, I feel like we can give everybody some ideas of, hey, what's happening here? Like, what are the apps and what are people consolidating around? And the big one that I've seen from my side, based on this report, is that the general assistant wars is basically intensifying, right? Last year we had ChatGPT and maybe Claude and Gemini was pretty low, but ChatGPT still leads. However, Google, Grok, and Meta are narrowing that gap in the general assistant wars, right? And when we talk about general assistants, we mean which app do you go to get answers and to work with every day? And like we said, this year, Google, Grok, and Meta are kind of coming up. Google Gemini came in second place behind ChatGPT with approximately 12% of ChatGPT's visits on the web. So we've seen a huge uptick from last year to this year in Gemini becoming, pretty dominant and kind of gaining that speed very, very quickly. That has to do a lot with also the incorporation of their video tools and also their amazing image models. So if you have not used Gemini recently, last week, we haven't talked about this, but last week they introduced their image editing model, which is called, what it was called?
No.
It was their banana image model.
Banana image model. That's the name.
Yeah. Yes. Let's see. It was called Nano Banana, right? So not just banana, but Nano Banana. That was code name Nano Banana, and it's amazing because what it enabled you to do, you're able to actually modify images and basically tell it, you can put two images together and so on and so forth. Think about it as Photoshop, but just telling it what to do, right? Just with words, you can upload an image and you can tell it what to do. You can put two images together. So people are having a lot of fun. It's very fast. It's very, very accurate. And it's probably one of the best, image editing models out there. So when you look at from that perspective, Gemini has gained a lot of usage because they've introduced this amazing image models in there. They've introduced the video models like VO3, but a lot of those are being tracked separately, but it's still that the usage is going up pretty far. Also, Gemini has introduced, we talked about this before, their 2.5 Pro and reasoning and so on and so forth. So Google has made a tremendous, speed for where they are today with Gemini. So Gemini has come a really long way for sure.
So Google as a category product family, right? So enters strong, right? But it's important to remind everybody that it's entering this ranking with 4 distinct, separately ranked products, right? And you spoke about Gemini, we spoke about Notebook LM, and our Google Apps is also showcasing here, sitting at 39, and it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, Notebook LM is another really amazing product from Google, so it's on this list, and that has been growing up. Number 13, yeah. So we talked about Notebook LM last week, and it was, like we said, was one of our better episodes. We love Notebook LM for what it's done, the audio overviews, and then the video overviews that it introduced. It's one of the best consumer applications over there that people are using for sure.
Yeah, Ardis, in terms of the kind of the all stars, right? So we talk about Google joining the all stars. We see categories on image generation, voice, productivity. That's basically the companies that consistently have been showing up in this report, right? The signals, the conversation I'd like to have is, all right, we see Google dominating making entrances, right? We also see Grok continue to move as well as Meta, right? So the all-stars, their endurance, right? There's a strategic mix that makes them stay, right? So, and it comes from multiple regions. What can we say about these applications and these products that makes them remain here as opposed to just kind of had a great year and they just fall through the waistline on year 2 or year 3, right? Is it just pushing the advancement, right? So we just said that Google's banana nano banana, right? This kind of mixes vibe coding
banana,
with
yeah.
with visuals. So what do you think is happening in these products and technologies that allows them to remain all stars and endure these AI journeys for the past 5 years? Anything that you see, a pattern or anything like that?
Yeah, so we're talking about consumer applications right now. When you talk about consumer applications, a lot of people are not going to be like us, and they're going to pick one general assistant. So they're one general assistant. So think about ChatGPT or Perplexity or Poe. Like you're going to pick one of those, or Claude or whatever. So at the top of the list, it's ChatGPT, obviously. So that's the number one assistant. And then you move into basically use cases of what you need. So companionship, you have character AI as the category winner in companionship. You want image generation, you go to Midjourney. Midjourney has been amazing in terms of what it's been able to do. They've introduced new models recently, but they've also introduced video, which I love the Midjourney video 8-second generation, which is pretty cool. And then you have Leonardo, which essentially Leonardo.ai, they give you the ability to use different models, but to create images. So it's like a platform for creating images with different models. So again, that's an image generation. You also have image and video editing, like with VEED and cutout. So those are both video editing. And then you also have one of our favorites, which is voice generation, 11 Labs. So 11 Labs has become, such an important product for voice generation. And then when you move to productivity tools, you see things like Perplexity and or Gamma, for example, being up there and being some of the top models. So again, you're essentially have what you call different use cases and different one of these apps kind of bubbling to the top based on real use cases. That's what you're calling the all stars, so to speak.
But to wrap up the conversation on all stars, right? So what we see, there's a pattern, right? And there's 14 brands, products that continue to showcase here, right? So, and to your point, it feels that the pattern is about utility, identity. We see ChatGPT, 11 Labs, Midjourney, Poe, Character AI, Gamma, Perplexity, Quillbolt, Civitai, Hugging Face, Photo Room, Cut out that Pro. I don't even know what this one is, right? Leonardo, of course, and Invid. These continue to dominate, and it's a recurrent pattern. Let's flip the coin to newcomers. These are companies and products that have emerged. They're kind of, in a way, new ones. And there's this copycats to the originals, right? So variations of ChatGPT, if you will, right? So anything from your side on the newcomers, anyone that caught your eye? I do really think that the copycat era is ending, and this is probably the last time they will start showing up, if anything. Anything stands out? I know Lovable is one of probably the technologies that you've evangelized the most on. Our practice uses a lot of Lovable. We use Lovable because you brought it to Element and to our user conference. So from your side, anything on the newcomers?
Yeah, I would just say Lovable is perhaps one of the big ones that I would say has been a breakout since last year to this year. And then in terms of newcomers, you also see some of the video models being consolidated as well. So you're seeing models from like the VO3 models from Google consolidating a lot of things. So that's a newcomer, the VO3 model from last year, and that's separated from from their as a new category. You also see Grok becoming a huge entrant in here. So Grok very, very quickly moving up the ranks as with their Grok 4 model. They have been doing tremendous, and they also have introduced new images, image generation, and even video generation on Grok as well, if you have the Grok app on mobile. We've talked about Grok also introducing this assistants as well, which has been pretty interesting. And a couple of those assistants are, you can have spicy mode in there and like a little bit not safe for work type of interactions, which have been pretty interesting if you play around with them. But yeah, I would say those are the big ones that kind of pop up for me for sure.
Yeah, we've been talking a lot about the rise of vibe coding in this podcast, and the data suggests that it's also a dear for our consumers, and consumers as creators is the thing, right? So Lovable, as you mentioned, Replit showcasing here, Superbase, they are all in this vibe coding area. And yeah, it's the thing that I like about vibe coding is it reduces the distance between idea, right, and app. And from a consumer approach, many of us are jumping into it because truly that reduces the distance between idea and app. Yeah, and the data suggests it's a category that is standing on its own.
Yeah, vibe coding for sure. I think you see Replit and Lovable; those are the two top vibe coding kind of platforms. With Lovable becoming one of the fastest ones. You also, obviously there's a whole bunch that were pretty interesting, like Bolt last year. That one has kind of dropped off a little bit, but we're not calling them vibe coding anymore because a lot of folks are using these platforms to do real work, and it's if it's LLM generation of code, we're calling it more agentic coding, right? So vibe coding has this notion that you just let the AI do whatever, and you can just vibe and mess around with it. It's much more advanced than that. So maybe that was the case maybe 6 months ago. Now we're calling it agentic coding because there's people who are working with Cursor or who are working with other apps that are not necessarily consumer apps, but you're seeing those come up as well, and it's called agentic coding. So the naming convention needs to be updated a little bit. Yeah,
I like that a lot because personally I haven't seen that in my streams of information. The shift between vibe coding to agentic coding makes a lot of sense. My reaction to that, as I hear, is I like it. Number two, when vibe coding is introduced to professional developers, I find it to be there's a little bit of resistance because, yeah, to my earlier point, it's too easy for non-technical folk or non-professionally trained developers and whatnot to vibe code versus agentic coding positions this artifact of coding, orchestration and whatnot at a different level. I totally get
exactly.
it. So I like that distinction. It reminds me a bit of when I started with data science and people like me were trained in R or MATLAB. So we have all this classical training, and all these Python coders come out of nowhere and they're like super fast and doing their things. So you can hack data science. And there was a bit of a resistance, like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this for 10 years, 20 years, and you've been doing it for a month. We're not on the same level, right? So it makes a lot of sense for the distinction. I like it. So it's a good call out.
Yeah, when you think about the consumer apps, like if you're a consumer and you're building applications, you're using Lovable, and you're also, if you want a database or if you want a backend for that and you're building stuff, Lovable, you can connect it with what's called Superbase, which gives you kind of the storage. It gives you a lot of kind of hosting and all those pieces. So Lovable and Superbase have become really important if you want to build kind of apps for yourself or for other people as well. But these are two of the back end or vibe coding kind of platforms, or agentic coding, so to speak.
Yeah. Ardis, let's switch to something that the report took an angle on, kind of global dynamics, somewhat controversial, if you will. In terms of the data, we started seeing how there's China-based usage on products, right? Products like Quark, Dubao, Kimi, very interesting showcases. But let me just take it a very, very high level. How did you react to this global dynamics as a section on this report?
One of the things that we saw earlier this year was kind of the rise of DeepSeek models, and DeepSeek rose very fast, and then it kind of dropped off very fast as well. So,
Correct.
but we also seen some very amazing models come out of China as well, and products being built on top of that. So, the report certainly calls out that not only are good models coming out of China, but also there's also different products that are coming out of there as well, and there's a big traffic. So China is not allowed to use some of the U.S.-based models, so they're building and using things internally, right? So obviously, being a big population, we see a lot of these traffic and a lot of those numbers coming up pretty high. The things that have been exported from China, like Kling and some of the video models or some of the image models, are coming out of there as well. DeepSeek, we saw that, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to think about it. It's usually one of those things where whoever is producing the better apps, we saw TikTok come out of there. So, certainly with AI, Manus was another one that was, I believe, was China based, and then that's a general coding or agentic kind of platform as well. So that came out of China. But I don't know. What do you think?
I didn't like this part of the report. Look, it makes sense to give a global report, but the grouping of China versus the rest of the world, I just didn't like that classification. Obviously, Chinese technology deserves its space. We saw with the drop of DeepSeek how they were able to train with a totally different value proposition. So we think, right, that it was, more leaner, it required less computational power. So we think, right. But anyway, it was an interesting category. I love to see just this geographical spread, not only in the US, but also Europe there, right? So, there's a lot of French technology that dominates. So my particular take on this is AI, it's a world play in terms of technology and production and consumption. And yeah, the world map indicates that it kind of looks like, even in the report, when we subset the all stars, you see a geographical spread, obviously in the US, kind of dominating that. But we have French, Hong Kong, New South Wales, London with 11 labs, right? And of course, some of the Chinese products, in this case, still showcasing. So it's an all-star map. It's a global play. And the divide between China and the rest of the world, I don't know, it just didn't feel right to me at this moment. So,
yeah. Jesse, should we talk a little bit about kind of the comparison from last year to this year? So obviously, we kind of mentioned that 2024 DeepSeek rocketed from obscurity and then became a kind of ChatGPT challenger, and now it reached number 2 globally last year, and then DeepSeek this year, it's kind of dropped off, right? So it's down more than 40% from its peak in February 25. So that's a big change. Obviously, the rise and fall of DeepSeek. So now a lot of the reasoning models and everything else has kind of overtaken that. Number 2, we saw Google's aggressive, entry. So 2024, Google products weren't separately trackable just because the way they were being tracked. But this year, with Gemini taking number 2, and there's 4 Google products that made the list, and it's really showing Google's strategic kind of unbundling, that they're basically going after all of the, not just the general assistants with Gemini, but also VO3, and we saw Notebook LM, and we saw one Nano Banana, maybe, I don't know.
Nano Banana, I still cannot. I need to get there. Nano Banana.
Yeah.
By the way, that unbundling, Google is being very smart. If you were to group them, they would probably take over. They get closer to ChatGPT for sure. But anyway.
Yeah. They're double. I mean, what they said is doubling of their tokens within just a couple of months once they released Gemini 2.5 this past, I don't know, a couple of months ago. But we also see from 2024, we saw 17 new web entrants, and there was like pretty dynamic, whereas this year, the difference is only there's 11 new entrants, so there's consolidation that's happening there. This is the market maturity. 2025, the mobile list has significantly more newcomers, right? So there's about 14 of them in 2025. So the Apple App Store they've cracked down on the ChatGPT copycats, like we talked about,
Right.
and it's opened a lot more room for original mobile apps, so, which is great. When you're thinking about in terms of from a consumer behavior evolution, 2024 it was the long initial plateau, which kind of stemmed from ChatGPT's early novelty factor, and many consumers found it intriguing but lacked compelling daily use cases. So this plateau being used in 2024, whereas in 2025, you see this utilitarian consumer thesis, people adopting tools that help them do what they already need to do, but better, faster, and also cheaper, right? And
productivity plays.
Exactly. So last year it was more of a novelty. It's like, oh, I use it for certain things. Now it's, people have all their use cases and have ingrained them and are using it for real work, as we're seeing it in a lot of different places. When it comes to vibe coding, we talked about that. 24, we saw Bolt debuting in number 48 on the list, but it was just emerging in 2024, this vibe coding, right? So it's this couple of platforms. And then we see it this year, and it's like Lovable, number 22, and Replit on the list. And it's like, holy shit, like what's happening here? It's vibe coding and coding use cases becoming the most aggressive one. We also see video generation maturity. So from last year to this year, if you remember last year, we had Sora at number 23. I haven't even used Sora in the past year, to be honest. It's like, it's just been lost because Google has consolidated with
video.
VO3 model.
Yeah.
It's just amazing, right? And it's there's some video models coming out of China, but VO3 has just been amazing and it's been dominating. And we talked about last time about their world model as well, which was Genie 3, right? So the Genie model. Yeah. So I feel, essentially there is a maturity happening in consumer apps. Obviously, there's a lot of new changes. People are sticking around with the default is kind of the familiar, right? So the behaviors suggest this consolidation. There is the Chinese developed apps. There's about 22 out of the 50 mobile apps are Chinese developed apps, which is interesting. But the global usage highlights the internationalization of AI tools. So a significant percentage of the web list was also developed in China and now exported globally, so to speak, right? So with the vast majority of usage in other countries. So even China is building a lot of these apps, but the usage is being outside of this. So in terms of education, I don't know, did we talk about any education use cases at all?
No, we haven't. And I think that's probably a fun way to start wrapping us up. But
sure,
there's two things in this conversation that we're having, right? And as we bring the conversation towards education and our higher education expertise, right? This conversation, it's not all about rankings, right? It's a mirror of how kind of societies is absorbing AI into daily life. And there's three important things that are, distinct, right? We need to pay attention to adoption, right? The behavior in the apps and how kind of follows adoption, and the cultural hooks that take place. So when you bring that to education and students, I think it's really interesting because they bring adoption, behaviors, and cultural hooks to another level. So for me, education, right? The first thing that I would like to say, and then I'd love to see where you go, is there's a pattern of the utility, the identity, the companions, the productivity, the creative, right? Similarly, education, we need to start thinking about not the one tool that serves the students from beginning to end. Yeah, I'll be too naive, right? But how we start thinking about how do I support my students with the companions, with the video creation, with the writing tools and so forth. And that ecosystem, which is the signature that I've been seeing in terms of utility and identity, is probably the next play for them. What's your take on education and how to translate all these reports and data there?
Yeah, I would actually look at this more from, because these are consumer apps, right? So these are not necessarily, like schools are not providing this. So I'd look at this and say, oh, I can see that my students are probably already using some of these, right? They're using these learning apps, or they're using different consumer apps for teaching or for video generation or for writing or whatever. So that's the idea here, is like look at this list and then see what people are using the most, and then if you haven't heard of them, just go play around with it if you're in higher ed and see what students are using, or just give it to your kids or your students, or even go test them out yourself and see what they have to offer, because they're getting used by everybody who's coming into your college or high school or even K through 12. So highly recommend you take a look at that list and what's popular in there and go test it out and see what. I mean, I hate to say like what, like, in quote marks, right? Kids are using.
And then again, I'm a campus that is a Google campus, so just switching to Google may help me. But if I'm a Microsoft campus, so just switching to the Microsoft setup.
No, I wouldn't even think about that on this.
That's the point,
I wouldn't even think about that as from enterprises. This is purely consumer, right? This is like, what is everybody using day to day? And if you're still not thinking about like what to give to your users, I don't know, that's a different question altogether. But this is more interesting for that solo user to go in and say, oh, okay, now I can go in and take a look at this list and try these things out for my different use cases and see which ones are more popular than others. If you remember in old magazines, like computer magazines and so on and so forth, like the best sections were the top 10 apps for X, or top 10, this for whatever, like PC magazine or Mac user magazine. Like I used to go to Barnes and Noble and get those specifically for those lists. So this is probably very similar. Like go take a look at them. If you find a use case, go use them, test them out. And if you don't like them, you can cancel the subscription. Or some of them have a lot of, I have like 30 subscriptions or 40 subscriptions right now. So I was doing that the other day. But anyways.
The ones that you probably know, and I guarantee you have 20 that you don't remember that kind of have been hidden somewhere there. All right, Ardis, I really love the analogy of young artists here in Barnes & Noble's looking at these rankings, because, right, the rankings are just, as I said before, these are mirrors of how we are consuming AI into our daily lives. And the signature that we see is that we go from assistants to companions, from vibe coding to global dynamics, and at the end of the day, the future that we see in terms of adoption here is not who is building the smartest model, right? It's about who is building the app for people that can be introducing how we live with it, right? So very interesting conversation, Ardis.
All right, everybody. Well, go take a look at the list yourself, figure out some of the apps that you're not using and test them out. And we will come back next week with more AI as everything kind of heats up in September, and we're entering the fall announcement season and conference season. So there are lots of stuff happening. All right, till next time, JC. Generation AI is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you're going to like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing weekly, and we've got a wide range of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform that's helping institutions all over the country create meaningful, personalized, and engaging connections with their prospects and students. Learn more at element451.com.